Oh, they're gonna look for more chairs. Yeah. All right, well, I'm just about to call the meeting to order, but thanks everybody for coming. A lot of work's gone into this ordinance and it's great. All these people here to get feedback. So I think we're looking for some more chairs real quick, to try to avoid everyone having to stand. So maybe we'll just at the risk of everybody being uncomfortable for another minute or two. Why don't we? I'll just get going. All right. Call the meeting to order. If we could just start with Robert, why don't you call, just state your name for the record for attendance. Robert Scott Kramer, David Mattiel. Great. All right. Call the meeting to order, reported attendance. Article 2 is to stand and recite the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. Which stands one nation under indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, Article 3 calls to approve the current agenda. I entertain a motion. Or all in favor? Aye. Opposed? All right, agenda is approved. Article 4, does any member of the commission have conflict of interest to disclose? Robert? Nope. None for me? None. None. All right. Moving right along. All right, Article 5. We're looking to approve the minutes of the August 4th, 2025 meeting.
Motion to approve the minutes from last 4th and 5th meeting.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. All right, Article 6, to acknowledge visitors and those wishing to speak. So in this section, we'd open the floor for public comments on matters not related to the agenda items. If you'd like to speak on the recommendation of the zoning ordinance, there will be a public hearing after the staff presentation. And then we'll have everybody come up one at a time. Then, is there anyone who wishes to address the commission on an item that's not on today's agenda? Okay. No one coming forward, that will conclude Article 6, and we'll move on to Article 7. All right, so this is why everybody's here today. I imagine it's regarding the zoning ordinance amendments. And so we're moving on to case number 25-3892, recommendation of a comprehensive zoning ordinance amendment. We'll have a brief introduction from Supervisor Lasperance, followed by a presentation from Chris Corley from McKenna, our planning consultant. So after that, we'll move on to public hearing. So let's start with Grace.
Evening, thank you for coming, and hopefully we'll get some chairs for everybody soon. We're working on that. So how we got here today, over the past 4 years at the township, we've completed 2 initiatives that's already done that have to be done, or they're inevitable to make sure that growth in Cascade, when it happens, is growth that complements our quality of life and Cascade's character. West Michigan is booming. We're under tremendous amounts of pressure for commercial, industrial, residential growth. So we want to proactively make sure that it's growth that doesn't erode Cascade. We don't want to become Romulus, Michigan. The second largest airport is in our township. We're also a really high-end residential township. 72% of our tax base is residential taxes. We only get 6% property taxes from industrial. So our the way to keep Cascade is to continue to make it a valuable, desirable place to live for residents. Our first goal that we completed was the strategic plan. So back in 2022, everyone got a postcard in the mail, and the strategic plan would just try to gauge community goals, all sorts of community goals. So keep my taxes low. I want my streets safe, more pathways. The second initiative, so that was basically a big gathering of input for the public for overall issues. The second initiative that we completed last year was the master plan. And a lot of the goals in the overall strategic plan had to do with land use and development. Land use and development is governed by two different statutes in Michigan, or two different statutory requirements. First, you've got a master plan, which is that just deals with intent. You state your long-term goals, what your vision for the community, developers, residents, anyone can look at it, but this is what we envision. And it's not binding law, but it's a big picture you should have it. We did that last year. And the reason we needed to do it is because after we did our strategic plan, Cascade's old master plan, which you're required to have, every township has to have one, was inconsistent in some really important ways. It was very inconsistent with the goals of the community. Cascade's old master plan prioritized industrial development south and east of the airport. Along with that, they knew that industrial development would then create the need for additional on and off ramps, expressway ramps at potentially 4 different locations in Cascade Township. The goals in that master plan, the direction was not at all, at least from my perspective, but I haven't heard one person who disagrees. The goals were not at all consistent with keeping Cascade's, character and high end. It would have, that doesn't just affect the eastern portion of the air, just at the land adjacent to airport. You've got a new on and off ramp, so then you've got a gas station. That would erode that side of the township. The river is right there. Huge. So we hurried up, did that master plan. It was essential. We've changed some of our zoning already because we had to, based on the issues with the airport and their desired expansion. So we adopted a brand new master plan that I think nails our goals. And generally, well, unless you disagree with our goals, but our goals right now, overall, preserve Cascade's unique character, because again, those growth pressures, and 2, enhance residents' quality of life, the taxpayers that live here. Every developer would love to get into Cascade. Everybody wants to move here, but the reality is it's the taxpayers that we want to stay a nice place to live, and we're not I think we are a nice place to live compared to many other communities in county. We don't want to lose that. And I think opening up the floodgates for development, like we had our trajectory before, would have eroded that quickly. So we passed our master plan adopted our new master plan in 2024. At that time, or I guess we knew before, but that means our zoning has to catch up and be consistent with our master plan. So you have to have a master plan, which is big picture, intent, goal. But the zoning is actually everyday binding law. If you violate the zoning, you can get ticketed. There's ramifications. The master plan goes first, because again, that leads the direction, but the zoning must be consistent to be effective. We knew that our zoning law that had been changed, but it was over 20 years old. It was, I would say that it was too soft on developers, both commercial developers and residential developers. I guess the ones who got in, good for them, but I think going forward, we can demand a higher quality private development. Again, this all has to do with redevelopment, new construction. Everyone who's here, every building that's here, it doesn't force anything that's already here to change. This is just going forward when people are building new things for demolishing the existing thing and redeveloping. So again, it doesn't affect anybody's houses, anybody's business right now, unless you want to make a change. So this has to do with the zoning, which is actually enforceable law. We've been working on it internally for the past year-ish. We partnered with McKenna, a planning firm, because they have skills and expertise to do it. But the big goals that the master plan and the zoning are focused on I'm beating a dead horse, but it's again, preserving Cascade character, the right kind of growth, and then also residents' quality of life. So the things that it does makes it hard, developers won't like it. Most developers won't like it. For example, those subdivisions with, small private roads. You're gonna build a private road in Cascade, you have to make it up to public road standard. So there's stuff like that that developers won't like. Commercial development, there's lots of different requirements, higher quality materials. It's not that rigid, but that's the direction we're going. And then around the airport, again, it protects that as an agricultural and residential area. And then the number one goal, I would say, or at the top, that was in our strategic plan, which came from residents, and then in our master plan as well, was creating this kind of a village area. But then how do you define village? You have to have zoning to encourage certain kinds of development. That's, I assume, where there's a lot of interest, and it applies to the area. If you think of the village, it applies to start at the Tuffy site, Castle Park, down to like the Folling Warehouse, Dollar Tree. So basically Thornapple River Drive down to 28th Street, go up to 28th Street, take a left on Old 28th Street, kind of that triangle area. And that would be where our old zoning didn't have the complexity, I guess, to encourage. Like, you don't want a Tommy's car wash on Old 28th Street, that kind of stuff. So to keep it kind of quaint, smaller buildings, overall goals don't become like Ada, even though some of their buildings may look very, very nice. Don't explode like Ada. You want to keep that kind of big parking lot stuff, keep that, contain it. You don't want that creeping into the village. So that was one thing that was really complex and probably scary to a lot of people if you don't understand it, because it incorporates like a form-based code where it's not so much about how the building's used, but what type of materials, size, and that kind of stuff. I'm going way too far into the weeds, but that's where we're at. So we'll hear tonight in the presentation, and then what we want today is the public's feedback. And if we didn't get it right, we'll go back to the drawing table, but we're not all going to agree. We're not going to please everybody, but at least you know the general direction and goals, so that if you disagree with them, you can run for the board or complain at our board meeting.
Thanks, Grace. All right, let's move on to the presentation from the planning consultant.
Great. Thank you, Chair Kramer, or Vice Chair Kramer. Good evening, everyone. My name is Chris Corey. I'm with McKenna. We are a planning and zoning consulting firm. We've been proud to work with Cascade Township for about 5 years now on several of the initiatives that Grace mentioned, including the zoning ordinance. What my plan here tonight is to take an overview of some of the key policies in the ordinance, so everyone is on the same page with what's in this document before we take public comment and move forward to the next steps of the Planning Commission. What are those next steps? I want to step back about 2 months. The zoning ordinance subcommittee, which consisted of members of this body as well as the township board, worked together for, as Grace said, about a year to come up with a draft. That draft was unveiled to the public. Many of you have probably reviewed it on July 3rd and has been available on the website. On August 7th, the township board held a workshop in this room and made revisions to that document. It is the August 7th draft that is in the Planning Commission's packet and up for consideration tonight. As I go through this presentation, I am going to note spots, and there are some important ones, where the August 7th draft is different than the July 3rd draft. We do want to thank those who advocated to board members in advance of that August 7th meeting, and that advocacy did result in some changes at that meeting, as I'll get into. Following my presentation, the public hearing will begin, and we will hear from as many in the room as want to speak. After that, the Planning Commission will discuss any revisions that they want to make to the document. Procedurally, they are allowed to make revisions at this point. They need to list them in their motion. At the end of the meeting, the Planning Commission will make a motion, which could potentially be to recommend this document, this ordinance, to the Township Board for their consideration. I'll get into their process in a second. If they do so, as I say, that recommendation will come with some changes which will be made before that gets to the board level. Alternatively, if the town planning commission feels the number of changes is too high to move forward tonight, the planning commission could table and or send it back to the subcommittee to make those changes. If the planning commission decides to move forward tonight, the next thing that will happen is the updated version will appear on the website at some point this week. Next week, Monday, the township board will hold a workshop to discuss any revisions they want to make. There will not be a vote at that meeting. And then we have two more, and this is, again, if things stay on track and everything moves forward and everything feels positive, a first reading on August 27th, and the final adoption of this ordinance would be September 10th. All of that subject to change based on discussions by the decision makers tonight at upcoming meetings. I do want to talk a little bit tonight, which Grace touched on, about why this process is happening, why update the zoning ordinance at all. And then I want to get into what's changing. What's changing from your current ordinance if you're a homeowner? I know we have a note up there, not much. As Grace noted, this is not an ordinance aimed at homeowners. It is an ordinance aimed primarily at developers, and we'll get to that. What's changing if you're a large lot or agricultural property owner? What's changing if you're a business? And what's changing if you're a developer? So, why update the zoning ordinance? As Grace mentioned, the 2022 strategic plan, under its land use and economic development header, had 3 priorities to do with the zoning ordinance. That third one, priority 4, third one on your screen, listed as priority 4 in the document, to update the master plan and subsequently the zoning ordinance to position the township for the future. That is the strategic plan priority that we are working on right now. As Grace mentioned, the 2024 master plan, which envisioned the land use and development future of the community, hit on a number of topics that are addressed in this zoning ordinance. You can see many of them on the screen. These are actual headings and subheadings from that document that are very relevant to what is being talked about in the zoning ordinance up for discussion. Our guiding philosophies in drafting this ordinance: 1, protect the single-family neighborhoods. 2, preserve the rural character of the eastern part of the township. Those two go hand in hand. 3, upgrade 28th Street to meet Cascade's character and expectation. 28th Street's 16 miles long. It runs all the way across the Grand Rapids region. You have a chunk of it. Your expectation for development on that corridor, as it's been expressed to us, is higher than some of the other communities along that corridor. That needs to be expressed in your zoning, or developers that come in will simply give you what the other communities get. We want to enhance the village's unique style. That's the Cascade Village as Grace described it. It has a unique style. It can be enhanced, it can be improved, but keeping it a village. That's important. Additionally, we want to make it easy to further the township's goals. You should not have to come to this meeting and negotiate with the planning commission if you're doing something that advances the township's goals. It should also be hard to go against them. Those things should be difficult to impossible if they are not consistent with the township goals. And then finally, you're going to see these 2 words a lot during this presentation: demand quality. We want development in this community to be high quality. We don't want to just say that in broad terms like demand quality. We want to say it in specific terms. What do we mean by that? And we're going to get into that. Next. Quickly, what's not changing in the ordinance? First, the Airport Commerce District and airport overlays. These govern the airport itself and the areas around it. There's certain regulations outside of our control over the airport. All of that has been incorporated from the old ordinance directly into the new ordinance unchanged. It's been moved organizationally in the document, but the text is identical because there are no policy changes the township wants to make to those particular aspects. Additionally, a solar ordinance regulating solar energy development was adopted by the township within the past year. That is unchanged in this new ordinance. It's just been pulled right over and put in the new ordinance. Additionally, we want to make this point. Most provisions in most zoning districts are not changing. This is a new document procedurally because there are so many changes, but there are also large swaths of the township where if you were to look at your zoning before and look at your zoning after, the changes would be small or non-existent. So it is worth noting that the permitted land uses in most zoning districts are not changing. The dimensional requirements of most zoning districts, that's your setbacks, your building heights, not changing. There are major changes incorporated in what we'll talk about tonight: the overlays, the form-based code, and what we call general provisions, which hit on things like keeping animals or building a shed, that kind of thing. We'll get there. What's changing if you're a homeowner? as I've said several times, but I do want to reiterate, not that much. Most rules applying to single family homes are not changing. You do see an asterisk on this slide. You're going to see some asterisks as we go. The asterisks will denote changes between July 3rd and August 7th. There's a big one on this slide, and that is that the side setbacks for single family homes in the July 3rd draft, they were increased from current zoning. After further discussion, that has been eliminated. The side setback requirements, the setback between you and your side lot line.
In
Yes.
plain English, what is that back?
Setbacks is the distance between your building and your property line. Basically. Well, not basically, that's what it is. It's just your building and the property line. In this case, there were discussions about whether houses should be a little further apart in neighborhoods. That was in a draft. We looked into whether that's going to work in real life for real people. We decided it probably isn't and kept those rules the same. Additionally, the boundaries on the zoning map of our single family districts are not changing. If you're in a single family zoning district now, you will be in a single family zoning district when this ordinance is adopted. Next, a couple things to be aware of. So these are some changes. Fences. While the allowable height of a fence in a residential area, which is 4 feet in your front yard and 6 feet in the back or the side, is not changing, the ability to come to this body and ask for a taller fence by special use approval is being eliminated. Instead, anyone looking for a taller fence is going to have to go to the Zoning Board of Appeals. So this procedural change probably does make it a little harder to get a taller fence, but ultimately, the rules for those that wish to simply follow the rules, 4 feet in front, 6 feet in the side and the rear, that's not a change. Additionally, if you live on a property on the waterfront, so the Thornapple River or any of the other water bodies in the township, up to 4 waterfront lots may share a dock. So you can make an agreement between you to share a dock, have your boats on that single dock. However, beyond that, we have pretty significant restrictions. Keyholing is a very technical term, but what it basically means is a single lot on the water and a bunch of lots that aren't on the water that all have the rights to put their boat on that single lot. That is problematic for waterways, particularly rivers, and other waterways with limited carrying capacity for boats. That will now be highly restricted. Any properties that are not on the water are going to be highly restricted in getting off-site docks.
Sorry,
Yes.
just to clarify, that's for new development.
And that is for new development. There are a few existing neighborhoods that have access to that. That will not be changing. New neighborhoods will not be allowed to do that going forward. Accessory buildings. So accessory buildings, that's a shed, a garage, a pole barn, anything that isn't the house on a piece of residential property. Just want to go through the rules for those because honestly, that is the moment when most homeowners are going to interact with zoning, is when they want to build a new accessory building on their property. That's where they're usually going to get it. Every single family home is entitled to a garage. That garage could be attached to the home or it could be detached from the home, and it can be up to 65% of the area of the house in size. And that does not count to what I'm going to talk about in a minute, which is your other accessory buildings. It does not account, go towards that cap. So what is the cap? If you are in the FP, which is farmland preservation, or it says AG, it should say RC. That's the rural conservation district. If you're in one of those districts, there is no limit. You can have as many of these buildings as you want, as long as you meet all the other rules. If you're in a residential district like R1 or R2, then you're based on the acreage. And you can see on the screen, less than 1 acre, 1 building, 1 to 3 acres, 2 buildings, more than 3 acres, 3 buildings. Additionally, there are going to be limits on the size of buildings and setbacks, distances from the property line. And all of this will increase as your property gets bigger, because as the property gets bigger, you're further from your neighbors, you can build more without interfering with them. The changes in here, there are changes. They're not changes of type. There have been restrictions on this before. We think this is a simpler and easier system that's going to be easier for people to follow. You simply find the size of your lot, then you find your rules. There will be special rules for waterfronts, the Thornapple River, as I mentioned. In this case, you will have to stay at least 10 feet off the water as defined by the state of Michigan. By which I mean the edge of the water as defined by them. We are no longer under this ordinance allowing boathouses. So boathouses are those that extend out over the river itself. Those are no longer allowed under this ordinance. But you can have a dock, a hoist, a deck, a patio. Those things can go out over the water, just not a building.
And if you have one already, it doesn't matter.
And again, if you have one already, this does not mean you have to tear it down.
Chris,
Yes.
can we go back one slide? I just want to clear 2 slides. I just want to clarify something. Just for everybody's information, these numbers weren't just created by sitting around a table. There was actually some data that was pulled at previous cases that were brought before the planning commission. So for instance, an accessory building was allowed up to 830. We have no idea where that number came from in the past. So what we did is we looked at previous cases and said, what makes the most sense? It actually gives property owners more right to their property to do more with their property. So this is where we came up with this scale. So yes, the scale has came up, but the issue was planning commission was hearing a lot of cases to build accessory buildings or garages that were over 832 square feet. So it's really helping to streamline and help the process be easier and permitted by right, as opposed to having to go through planning commission. Did that clarify?
Yeah, thanks, Jay.
Yep.
Appreciate that. Yeah, in general, there are slight increases in what is allowable to make it easier to do what you want to do on your property. The second bullet point on here, which is that accessory buildings, if you have a waterfront backyard, that is one of the only, really the only situation in which you can take an accessory building and put it in your front, which is between your house and the road. So that is because the rear yard is sort of shared with everyone else who's on the water body, et cetera. So that's a special provision for those who are on the water. Accessory dwelling units. This is something that has been talked about in a number of different communities. This ordinance does not allow them. What is an accessory dwelling unit? That is building one of these accessory buildings, a separate building from your house, and then putting a dwelling unit in it, which is to say, how do we define a dwelling unit? It must have a kitchen and a bathroom. So if you can build a pole barn, you can put a kitchen or a bathroom. If you put both in, now we consider you'd have 2 houses on your property. That's not allowed. That's because we don't want to overburden our neighborhoods with extra houses in people's backyards. Next, if you are a large lot or agricultural property owner, a lot of the rules that apply to single family will also apply to you, especially if you've got a house on the property. And again, not a lot is going to change. Also related to this, if you are a farm and you are meeting the standards of the Michigan Department of MDARD, excuse me, and thus protected by the Right to Farm Act, you may be exempted from zoning rules. If you are in that situation, you probably already know that. However, those who do not rise to that level of being under the state regulations on agriculture rather than the local ones, there are going to be some rules about animals in this ordinance. There's a slide on this in a minute, but I'm going to say it up front. These rules are not rules where you have to come in and get a permit. They are rules where if there is a complaint about noise or odor or something like that, an investigation by the township will determine whether there is compliance with these rules or not. I will also note that the word pets is defined in this ordinance, and anything that falls under the word pets is not regulated. What is regulated is livestock. So basically the animals you see on the screen right now, fur-bearing animals, poultry, etc., as well as bees. The way this ordinance is organized is that every lot gets 1 animal unit per acre of size. And an animal unit equals a different number of animals depending on which animals you're talking about.
Chris,
Yes.
So big picture right now,
Yes.
residential, with some limitations, you can have bees, you have goats.
Not right now, I don't think. Or it
You
doesn't
can have
say.
small goats.
What is
Goats and
chicken?
sheep.
Basically,
Well,
you
but
did
in the
used to
current,
have
in
it.
the proposed ordinance,
It's not addressed in the current.
yeah, current ordinance doesn't address it. The proposed ordinance says what it says up there, which is to say that you can have goats and sheep in R1 and R2 if you have a full acre of land. If you have less than an acre, you can't, because that would be more than 1 animal unit. And other fur-bearing animals like elk, deer, alpacas, etc., have to be in those farmland preservation, rural conservation districts.
Or if it's not in your ordinance, it's assumed that it's not allowed, how it went. So now you don't have to hide your chickens in the in neighborhoods anymore, bees, as long as you don't go over.
So just as an example of how this would work, if I own a 5-acre lot in the rural conservation district and I have 2 horses, 3 goats, 10 chickens, 5 rabbits. It's a lot of animals, but it's not a farm. So it's not going to rise to the level of being protected as a farm. So 2 horses, that's 2 animal units. 3 goats, that's an animal unit and a half, because each of those is 0.5 animal units. 10 chickens, that's 0.5 total animal units. And 5 rabbits is 0.25 animal units. Add that all together, 4.25 animal units on my 5-acre lot is allowed. So again, to reiterate though, this animal stuff, it's not something we have to come get it from the township to have these animals. It's a thing where if you got animals, you have them in your backyard, you have them on your property, you're taking care of them, your neighbors are not negatively impacted, and they don't call and complain, it's never going to come up. However, if you live next to somebody and there's manure and there's things running into your yard and there's things that aren't being well enclosed or being kept in a humane manner, this objective standard of how many animals can be contained in a certain size lot will help the township with enforcement of those issues. That's what it's designed to do. Next, moving on to whether rural property can be developed into, say, new neighborhoods or something like that. There is a new system in this ordinance called purchase of development rights. This is a fund that the township will have as a few different ways of putting money into that will allow property owners to monetize their land without selling to developers. Instead, in a monetizable amount, an amount of money equivalent to the development rights of a parcel will be determined, and then the township can purchase those rights. Nothing gets built, but the property owner gets money. That would set up a system where nothing could be developed on that property beyond a certain limited scope, like a house, a single house, basically indefinitely, unless the property owner wants to buy themselves back out. The purpose of this is in order to prevent the spread of development east of Buttrick Road. By making sure that folks out there who own property can monetize the economic value of their property without actually seeing it built on. This ordinance was developed by the township attorneys at Boston Swift and has been incorporated into the proposed ordinance. Another way that we are trying to discourage development out in the eastern part of the township is what we're calling the private road ban. We're calling it a ban because the starting point is you can't build a private road. There are several exceptions, but the starting point for any discussion with a developer is you cannot build private roads. Roads must be dedicated to Kent County as public roads when you build them. The purpose of doing this primarily is to prevent the breaking up of our farmland and our woodlands on the eastern part of the township. Because what ends up happening is if someone has some land and they want to split it into lots, but they don't have enough road frontage, they create road frontage by building a private road. What we've seen with those roadways, in addition to the degradation of the natural and agricultural systems, is also sometimes they are built with no long-term maintenance plan in mind. 10, 15, 20, 30 years down the road, they deteriorate and the property owners along them argue with each other about whose pothole is whose responsibility. They come to the township can't do anything about it because it is not a public road. It's a situation we've had in the past. We want to prevent in the future, so we do not want to see these types of roads built. Instead, we want homes built, if they're going to be built, along existing road frontages. These two images demonstrate the point. On the left, you see the houses are built along a public road, all in a line. Behind those homes, there are large backyards, they're wooded, there's some agriculture going on, etc. So all of that rural character is still preserved in behind the homes, but the homes can be built along the frontage. The image on the right, you see the homes have been built on a new road that snakes around off of the main road. What does that do? You see the trees that have been cut down. You don't see any agricultural activity going on. You see wetlands consolidated in drainage ponds, all of that. It degrades the natural environment. And it happens because people want to build private roads. So the township will not be allowing that beyond Buttrick in the FP and RC districts or anywhere else except for a few exceptions. Now, exceptions. We will be talking about the overlays in the form-based code. Those are exceptions, but instead of a ban, they have a significant set of rules for what a private road has to look like physically and operate like in terms of long-term maintenance. And additionally, we do have an exception for roads that access 4 or fewer homes. That's a small enough number of homes. The township feels that that collective group can get together, maintain the road, and also 4 or fewer homes is unlikely to push way back into agricultural woodlands. So it's just a sort of small exception. All right, if you are a business owner, what is it that this ordinance is trying to do? So the philosophies. We do want to promote investment in existing businesses. Absolutely. The businesses in township are highly valued by the township's leaders. We want to promote investment. But we expect high design standards. Again, demand quality. Cascade deserves businesses that look beautiful, right? And that's going to attract customers and that's going to create business success and then everybody wins. We also want to make sure we're limiting corporate architecture. I mentioned 28th Street. 28th Street is a magnet for corporate architecture. It's a magnet for people that come to this body and say, this is our corporate standard B12, McDonald's, Burger King, Chick-fil-A. It's what they all look like everywhere in the country. Township doesn't want that. Township doesn't want you to look like everywhere in the country. We want to look like Cascade. So we want to make sure we're limiting, if we can, that corporate architecture, and we have text to do that. The word overlays has been used a lot, and it is an important aspect of this proposed zoning ordinance. So let me take a step back and describe what is that? You see on your screen here the mixed use overlays that are proposed for this ordinance. As you can see on the map, they are primarily designed around 28th Street and its immediate vicinity, and I will get into the difference between these in a minute. The map on the left is a map of zoning districts without any overlays and without any planned unit developments. Those in the room who are very familiar with the zoning ordinance will know that the township zoning map does not look like the map on the left. The township zoning map, as it stands right now, has 99 special carve-outs called planned unit developments. They cover a huge swath of the township, including residential neighborhoods, parts of 28th Street, industrial areas, all sorts of stuff. What that means, in short, is that somebody came in front of this body and the township board and made a special deal to have special zoning for themselves. That is a legal process under the Michigan Zoning Enabling Act, where we must allow it as an option. However, it is a key philosophy of this ordinance to discourage that. We want to establish rules for everyone, and if you match the rules, then you're approved. And if you don't match the rules, you don't get to build. Simple as that.
Hey, Chris,
Yes.
is it fair to say that Cascade Township is pretty much made up of those, like, you have an underlying zoning and then none of it applies because everything is in a PUD, which means you just made a deal, you worked it out what you want with the planning.
I will say this, as consultants, when we started looking at this, we're concerned about the number that have been approved in here.
Had you seen that many in the township?
I don't think I've seen 99 anywhere else. But again, this is a commonly used tool, but 99 implies that there was a stretch of time here where that was how everything was being approved. And what is happening now, to give you a glimpse behind the curtain of what Andrea does every day, is that when people want to make changes to their property, they end up having to deal with rules that were established 20, 25 years ago by people who aren't around anymore for their particular purposes. Some of them are quite silly and even extremely limiting and make it hard to invest in a business. That is the purpose of these overlays. The overlays go over the top. And I'll get to how they interact with those planned unit developments. What they do is they create a consistent set of rules for an area that has lost its consistent set of rules. And that way, every property is treated more equally. And that's particularly true in 28th Street. We do have a couple of specific goals here. We know we have some aging office parks in this community. We know that post-pandemic, the office market has struggled. And even some of the office buildings that look pretty nice are struggling with occupancy. Looking forward, we know there may be opportunities for those to be redeveloped. And we want to make sure there's opportunities to do that aren't by making sure that zoning is not an impediment to investing in those properties. We also want to make sure that this part of the township, where we're sitting right now, and the rest of the 28th Street corridor, which is the part of the township that has infrastructure, it has high capacity roads, it has water and sewer, it has this fire station. This is the part of the township that can actually absorb the growth that Grace talked about, instead of pushing that growth further east. Now, we still want to do that in a way that is consistent with Cascade's vision for itself. And then finally, the overlays are one way that we're going to demand quality. These planned unit developments that we mentioned, how do the overlays interact with them? They cannot override them. They are two-way agreements between the township and a property owner that the township cannot void unilaterally. However, the township can make rules about what happens going forward. One is that within these overlays, you are no longer allowed to create one of these planned unit developments. So no new ones can be created. Additionally, anything that's amended. So a lot of times what we have happen and what Andrea sees is someone comes in, they want to do something, expand their business, and they run into rules in their planned unit development that were not designed for them. They were designed for the original tenant of the building in the 1990s or something, and they want to amend their PUD. And we understand why they want to do that, and that is something desirable to the township. However, now that we have these overlays, or once we have these overlays, any changes to a planned unit development will have to change so they are consistent with the overlay. There won't be flexibility. It will simply be, you don't want this, then you get this. Additionally, a property owner who really hates the planned unit development they're in, just simply doesn't work for them anymore, can voluntarily void it, and they could use the overlay. And in some cases, there are properties where we think it's going to be a fairly easy choice as far as the rules. Now, if you're an existing business in one of these overlays, the point being made previously, again, nothing has to have, we are not legally allowed to tell you you have to make a change unless you come in to tell us you want to make a change. So most of these rules kick in at the point where the business wants to physically expand its footprint and get larger. At that point, certain rules will come in. But we do want to make sure that businesses are allowed to expand and invest, right? We want to encourage expanding and investing. That means getting them out from out-of-date planned unit developments, but it also means, again, demand quality, architectural, site design, landscape standards. We want to upgrade these sites as businesses invest. Now, I'm going to come back to overlays in the final section of the presentation, which is the developer section. That would mean I'm tearing something down or I'm building on brand new undeveloped ground, not a business that's just expanding itself. We'll get there. Finally, the form-based code. This is the new zoning for the village. What you see on the map, or excuse me, what you see on the screen is a map. This is how the township master plan defines the village. We had a lot of discussion about how exactly the village is defined. Is it the top of the hill? Is it the bottom of the hill? So you see Cascade Road coming across the bridge, running up past the Folding Warehouse and the other things in the Thornapple Center shopping area, as well as 28th Street and Old 28th Street running up the hill to approximately where the library is, and then extending west to actually where we are sitting right now at the fire hall. This is the area incorporated into the village. The form-based code is 4 zoning districts. The village core, what we call the village fringe, which is up here, Thornapple Center, which is the actual shopping center, and then the Old 28th Street corridor running down the hill. The form-based code is not an overlay. It is brand new zoning districts. These properties are proposed to be rezoned. They have detailed standards for architecture, site design, and road design for brand new roads. These standards are going to be more intricate than in the overlays. Why? Because this is our village, and we want every detail of any new buildings or expanded buildings in the village to meet what we think of as a high quality village. And we'll get to the details. And again, this is an opportunity to demand quality from new investment. How does form-based code interact with planned unit developments? The exact same way that the overlays do, right? It cannot override them, but it can prohibit new ones. It can force any revisions to comply, and it can allow property owners to say, this old thing isn't working, I want to do the new thing. If you're an existing building business in the form-based code, just like the overlays, we want you to expand. We want you to get out of outdated PUD rules. We will hold these businesses to architectural, site design, and landscape standards. Those will be evaluated before the project gets here by the Village Design Review Committee, which will look specifically at the aesthetics. And then we'll make a recommendation to the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission will evaluate all of the rules that apply to a particular development, and particularly those aesthetic architectural things with the building. They're the ones that determine whether the architectural standards are met. The standard, though, is to the extent determined practical. And that's to make sure that business owners are not burdened by their existing buildings. There are going to be buildings that as we try to upgrade them to the look that we want, it's going to be hard. And the Planning Commission is going to be able to take that into account as they evaluate an existing building. Now, that is not going to be the case for a brand new building, which is why we're going to get to developers, the final section. Thank you, everyone, for bearing with me on this long presentation. Developers. Now, these are the folks out there that are going to see the most changes, the people that interact with the zoning ordinance professionally because they build new buildings. These are the people that we're going to truly demand quality from. We want the developers who are looking to build in Cascade, and their first thought might be, I just want to build in Cascade. They haven't knocked down a piece of property yet. Where do we want them looking? We want them looking in the places that have the infrastructure and are already built out, like here. Not in the quiet, rural, or residential parts of the township. So we want to steer them in that direction. We do want to allow creativity, but within Cascade's vision for itself. So what we do not want is a developer coming up with a project not even looking at our ordinance and just showing up to this body or the township board and saying, look at my great project. And we have had that happen. We need to know that this is happening within the boundaries of what Cascade wants for itself.
And that's essentially what a PUD is, right? Or could be.
Yes, what we sometimes see, and not to just paint the development community in a broad brush, what we sometimes see is folks who simply will not look at the ordinance. They'll say, this is what I want to do, and then they'll get a list of 15 things that are wrong with it under the ordinance and say, well, I'm going to do a PUD. I don't care about that. We're going to make a deal. That's not what's going to happen going forward. We also want to make sure that we can redevelop some of the eyesores and the problem properties. We know we have a few, especially in this 28th Street corridor. We have aging hotels, aging fast food, things that, hey, there may be a better future for that. We want to make sure that's possible. And as I've said several times, we want to demand quality. On this map, you see what's called the utility service boundary. That's the blue line on the map. The utility service boundary is the maximum extent under township policy, and if this ordinance is adopted under township ordinance, that public water and sewer systems can be extended. It's roughly Buttrick Avenue. It does extend a little bit past that in some places, and it comes back to the edge of the airport in other places. But basically, public water and sewer will not be extended past this line as long as this is in effect. That has a practical concern, which means, hey, if you want potable water and a place for the toilet to flush, you're going to have to do well and septic, which is going to automatically reduce what can be built. But also it has an ordinance effect, which is to say that if you are zoned a certain zoning district, but you do not have water and sewer, you don't get the full rights of that district. You are treated as if you were in a rural conservation district or a residential category or something like that. You may notice that R1 and R2, well, R1 in particular, is not impacted by this. R1 is R1, no matter where you are. It's other districts where we may see industrial, commercial, more high density residential development. Those do not kick in unless you have water and sewer. So that's how the two things work together. Housing in general. Some rules that we're going to make sure we demand quality from new housing. We know there is significant demand for new housing. We know it's going to get built because it has to be, because the market is dictating housing is going to get built. So we want to make sure it's quality housing. First one, site condominiums. This is a very technical point, but site condominiums, which many of you may live in, as opposed to a plat, have sometimes been used as a loophole to get around rules. That won't be happening anymore. Those two things will be treated identically. Additionally, all dwelling units, if you're a multifamily dwelling unit, you must have at least 800 square feet of living space. If you're a single family dwelling unit, 1,100, except in R1 and R2, it goes all the way up to 1,300. That's the minimum size for a new single family house here in Cascade under this ordinance. You must have a functioning kitchen. You must have a full bathroom. Why is this important? Because we're hearing talk, you probably, or many of you hearing talk about tiny homes, micro units, renting out hotel rooms, calling them permanent dwellings. That will not be allowed under this ordinance. You will not have sufficient square footage. You will not have a functioning kitchen. You may have a functioning bathroom in the hotel rooms, but you're not going to have enough to be considered a dwelling unit, and therefore that's not going to be allowed in this community. Next, demanding quality from your roadways. We mentioned earlier that private roads are frequently built to substandard design standards, as well as not being adequately funded for long-term maintenance. We don't want that. So if we're going to get new roads, they're going to be in these overlays. They're going to be in the form-based code as part of expanding the village or something like that. And we're going to have sidewalks on both sides of them, or bike paths. We're going to have curbs. We're going to have street trees. That's why we want, if this is going to happen, it's going to happen with high quality and long-term maintenance in mind. Getting back into the overlays, if you're a developer, what are you allowed to do? You see the chart up here. Right now along 28th Street, there's no housing. Actually, that's not true. There's a few housing developments that have been approved by plan unit developments. To be honest, the township's not very happy with them. They're not particularly quality housing developments. We do, however, want to be able to work housing into this corridor. Why? Because it has infrastructure, because the market is dictating that some of these office buildings are in financial distress, and some of the retailers and some of the restaurants are struggling. And what do we need? We need housing. So how are we going to potentially change that? In some of, but not all, in some of the mixed use overlays, housing will be permitted. You see a number of no's with asterisks up there. In the July 3rd draft, many of you who reviewed this section may have noticed that all of the mixed use overlays allowed housing. Now only a select couple. I will call out the yellow on the map, the light green on the map, and the gray, the sort of gray hatching area on the map. That's the Star, Glenwood, and Centennial overlays. Those are the ones that would allow housing. And the reason for that is those are office parks. And because they're office parks, we are envisioning a potential future where their economic viability is in question, and we want to allow the reuse of some of those sites. Some of those buildings may be convertible into residential, others may not, but ultimately zoning will not be the impediment to why they can be converted. Additionally, we know that hotels, which are very popular in this community among developers because of the airport, because of the highways, have a relatively short lifespan, 15 to 20 years. Once that happens, you start to see them degrade, and we have experienced that. Therefore, we want to control the proliferation of hotels. Those will only be allowed in the interchange overlay, which is kind of the Myers area. As you know, there's a number of relatively new hotels there. That's an appropriate place for them, and that otherwise they will be restricted. And in terms of building heights, along the corridor, there is an opportunity to get a little bit taller, not a lot taller, but a little bit taller than we have right now in order to encourage the redevelopment and investment in some of these sites. The final thing I will note on this slide, there was previously an overlay way down at Broadmoor and 60th. That has been removed. That area will continue to be subject to its previous zoning approvals and districts. Now, if I want to build housing in one of these overlays, how much can I build? Well, of the 3 where you're allowed to build housing, in Centennial, you could build up to 6 units per acre, and in Star and Glenwood up to 8 units per acre. But if you want to go higher than that, you can do so up to a cap by improving quality. And we'll get there in the next slide and exactly what we mean by that. And this is another way in which we're going to try to discourage planned unit developments, because frequently planned unit developments come in because a developer just wants to go a little bit above a density cap, just a few more housing, a few more apartments, please. We're going to have a system whereby if you do this, then you get a couple of more. And here's how the system would work. So these would be the items that a developer could do in order to get a few more housing units. They could donate to the township's green space preservation fund. That ties to the purchase of development rights that I talked about previously. That would be one way that that fund would be funded, and that would allow them to increase the number of units. The township board's going to set that at a later date. Additionally, if they preserve green space, that could increase the number of allowable units. If they dedicate a certain percentage of the units for owner occupancy, they're building multifamily, these would be condominiums, then that can increase their density. If they are doing mixed use, they have commercial space as well as residential, that can increase a little bit. If they are building pathways, we know the pathway system, which is growing and people love it in this community, it's a really great asset. Developers can build them for us at no cost to the township. In exchange, they could have a few more units. And then finally, stormwater. As with everywhere in Michigan, stormwater is always a concern. We got to make sure that it is running off safely, we're not flooding, and also in a way that is environmentally responsible. So if a developer buys a piece of property, tears down what's on it, and builds something new, if less water is running off that property than it was before, well, then they get a little bonus. So these are all things we want to encourage. And in order to do that, we allow the developer to build a little more. As an example, if you've got an aging hotel on a 4-acre lot in the Star overlay, this is not a real property. Just putting those parameters out there. It's going to be demolished. It's going to be replaced by new mixed-use residential commercial development, 10,000 square feet of commercial, half-acre green space, connection to one of the pathways, and a guarantee 50% of the units will not be rented. They will be homeowners for a period of 5 years. In order to do that, you take the 8 units, you add in all those bonuses, they get 11.5 units. You multiply that by their 4 acres, it could be 4612. So that's a potential development under one of these overlays. What else would they have to do? They'd be required, if they're building residential, to provide outdoor space. This is one of the concerns the township leadership currently has about some of the developments we've seen in the 28th Street area with housing. They fill the entire site with housing and parking. There's no green space, nowhere to walk your dog. So that is going to have to be required. At very least, folks are going to have a balcony or something. Upgraded landscaping requirements, more trees, more green space. And that's ultimately going to be a more attractive corridor, less concrete, more green space. We also, as many of you know, anyone who's driven on 28th Street knows it's chaotic. It's dangerous. It can be scary. We don't have a cone of control over that. 28th Street is run by MDOT and the Road Commission. However, we do have control over things like where driveways can be placed. The fewer driveways, the fewer turning cars, the less chaos. And obviously, every business or development will have its opportunity to have its connection in 28th Street, but we want to reduce those. We want to incentivize sharing those. We want to have one, not two. We want to match them up with existing traffic lights, all of that sort of thing. And then architectural requirements. Now, these are not going to be as strict as the ones in the form-based code, but they will kind of tie to the form-based code in terms of its intent, types of architecture we want to see, which I'll show in a minute. And we do not want corporate architecture. We do not want a building that is actually a sign. And that is what especially the fast food joints do. They have a building and that's their building design and everyone knows what McDonald's looks like, right? That's great for McDonald's. It's not what Cascade wants. Cascade wants to look like Cascade, not McDonald's. So no corporate architecture. Finally, we get to the form-based code. Here's your map of the village again. And here's if I'm a developer, what can I do? Well, I can build commercial development anywhere in the form-based code. If I want to put in housing, I can mix it with commercial and a mixed-use development anywhere in the form-based code. But if I want to do just housing, I cannot do it in the village core down at the Cascade and Thornapple River area where we want to have businesses. And I cannot do it up here in the village fringe, which is already built out with businesses like the ones next door or D&W, et cetera. Instead, I could do that with a special use permit along Old 28th Street, or maybe if I wanted to take part of that underused parking lot over at Thornapple Center for something like this. That obviously would be reviewed by the Planning Commission for sufficient parking, et cetera. But it is a potential option. Under current zoning, it's not. I will note that on July 3rd, standalone housing was allowed in all 4 districts. In the August 7th draft under review tonight, it is not. And then looking at how housing would work in the form-based code in terms of density, this would be a sliding scale. So if you have a small lot under half an acre, you can have 2 dwelling units. You have a business with a couple of units above. Half an acre to a full acre, you can have up to 4. So maybe it's 2 businesses and four condos above. 1 to 3 acres, you can get 6. So it's 3 businesses and 6 condos above. Anything over 3 acres, you're going to 2 dwelling units per acre. So what this means is a very large site, like say the Thornapple Center, cannot blow up into a multi-hundred unit housing development. It would be smaller than that. There are no bonuses under this system. The overlay bonuses do not apply here. That is the system, period. What do we want to do? We want village scale mixed use developments. And what does that mean? That means a lot, a business, maybe 2 couple dwelling units. That's a village size, right? You add those up to, you build 5 or 6 of those. That's a village. You put that together. Any bigger than that, you start getting into, city, downtown. These are words that we've been told this community doesn't want that area to be. It's a village. So we keep it village scale with regulations like this. Now, there's a lot in here about setbacks. These are designed for walkability. We have some big roads it's scary to walk along, and we know that. And we don't have a lot of control over them because the road commission and MDOT control them. However, we can make sure that the buildings and developments and businesses that are along these roads are not making that situation worse for pedestrians by having big parking lots between you and where you want to go. So what this does is it pulls those buildings closer to the road. In places where we know there's high-speed traffic and the building being right up at the road isn't going to be safe or desirable, there are opportunities to put in landscaping and that kind of thing, like a little front yard, but not front parking. Because walking across a little landscape area on a nice pathway, people like to do that. Walking through backing up cars and other things of that, you don't want to do that. So that's what we're trying to encourage in form-based code. This is a little bit more details, but what I really want to bring your attention to is the maximum building height down at the bottom, 35 feet. Many of you may be aware in a previous draft, in the July 3rd draft, there was a provision that the Planning Commission could increase that height limit. That has been removed. 35 feet, that's a village height limit. That's about 2.5 stories. You can do 2 stories and then maybe a dormer story or something like that above it. That's the limit. There's no longer an opportunity for this Planning Commission to increase that height. So it is a more restricted than previous drafts. Site design, a lot of this is similar to the overlays, but I will note on this slide, the Village Design Review Committee mentioned before will review all of these developments. Now, when we say architectural, what do we mean? This ordinance has 3 types of architecture in it. They're all described And in the form-based code, they're very heavily regulated in terms of the specifics of the design. In the overlays, it's more, hey, meet the intent and give us one of these design options. The versus Craftsman. As you know, Craftsman is a vernacular architecture style, goes way, way back in the Midwest and throughout Michigan. And you do have some buildings in the village that kind of meet this idea of Craftsman. This is one that kind of goes in that direction. That's an existing building, as you all probably know, at Cascade Road and Thornapple River Drive. This next one is Main Street, traditional Main Street, right? It kind of looks like this. And this again is a building in your community. Though the second floor in this building isn't real. We would want these to actually be a second floor with a real use. But anyway, the building looks nice. And this is what a village's downtown would have had 150 years ago. That is our Midwestern American style for a downtown, and that's what we want are these types of buildings to look like. And then the final one is Victorian. That building is not in Cascade, but this is a type of architecture that is attractive. It conveys a sense of investment in the community because it has a little bit of extra design style to it, and we want people to do that in our community here. So that's three types of architecture. There's lots of different ways the designer can go with those three, but I will note that none of those is a McDonald's, right? All of them have some sort of history and culture to them that fit this community. And so by requiring each development to find its way design-wise in one of those three categories, we are anticipating that we will lose some of the corporate style architecture and instead gain some more things that are of character that look like. At this point, I will finally shut up. Thank you for your patience. I'm going to remind everyone of the next steps. We will be, the next step is the public hearing. We will take a public comment. Planning Commission will then discuss any potential revisions. They will then determine whether they will move this ordinance to the township board and what revisions will be made in that period. And then as you see, the next 3 meetings the township board has currently on their calendar. Again, that's assuming that the Planning Commission moves this ordinance forward tonight, that those would be coming up very quickly. As you probably know, 2 of them are next week. So we do invite everyone who wants to participate to continue to participate in this process as it moves forward. With that, thank you again for your patience. And it's time, Mr. Chair, to open the public hearing.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Chris. It's, as you can see, I mean, there's a lot that's gone into this. Really hard to synthesize all the work into under an hour presentation. Hopefully it wasn't like that. A lot of information. Great job, Chris. Just real quick, if you didn't mind, everybody who's here to speak, could you give me a quick show of hands? Because I just want to make sure are a lot of people here just to listen or? Okay, great. Okay. If everyone was here to speak, I gave everybody 5 minutes, we'd be here 5 hours. So I wanted to just make sure ahead of time. So, all right. At this point, I'll entertain a motion to open the public hearing.
Motion to open the public hearing.
All in favor? Opposed? All right. Okay, so public comment is now open. So first of all, if people who want to speak, if you want to form a line up towards the podium, that would be helpful. When you get up there, if you please state your name and your address for the record. All right. We're going to try to limit everybody to 5 minutes. Up to 5 minutes. We'll run a little clock and let you know if you're getting past that, just because we want to give everybody a chance to talk and we want to hear everybody wants to talk. So this is a structured opportunity for you to provide feedback on the draft ordinance. We want to hear it. We're in public comment just here to listen. Okay, so it's not like a question and answer forum. We're not going to provide immediate responses. If you get up, we want to hear your concerns, hear your questions. We're going to be taking notes on all those. We encourage everybody. Some people like to talk and leave. That's fine. But anyone who makes a comment, asks a question, please try to stick around until the public hearing is closed. And then we're going to have staff address those as best we can. Try to make sure everybody's, including the commission, is hearing feedback on all of those concerns. And so at this point, public hearing's open. We'd love to hear from you. Whoever wants to be the first person, have at it. Anybody else can just kind of form a line behind. And we'll get going again. Please refer to your name and address.
I'm Calvin Tran. I'm actually a resident of Granville, but I am here as a board member of Abundant Housing Michigan. We're a state-level advocacy organization for abundant housing for more Michiganders here in our Great Lakes state. I speak in favor of the amendments in general. I think it's a very smart approach to knowing that you have great infrastructure here and that we don't want sprawl. Sprawl is somewhat of a financially unsustainable model for growth, and I think growing where you already have great infrastructure is a great step forward. But I want to open up broaden the picture here because we are part of a great region that people want to live. People like myself want to work and raise a family in this community. I grew up here in Grand Rapids. And unfortunately, Michigan now ranks 33rd in terms of housing affordability. So we're in the bottom half, and we're behind places like Ohio, Indiana, and Wisconsin. And a big reason of that is that a big reason for that is that for the past half century and even longer, we have had laws, many of them found within the current zoning ordinance, that kill the development of new housing that we need today. We have a housing shortage, and instead of building more so we can house this next generation, including myself, people are bidding up the prices of housing until someone leaves or gives up trying. The median price of a home in Michigan now has risen over $100,000 in the last 5-6 years, and now we're reaching $300,000. This is a crisis. This is a California-style housing crisis that we are reaching. The good news is that this zoning ordinance change is, I think, a good step forward for addressing this crisis. The mixed use development is great because I think it's going to allow us to house more people closer to places where people work, people shop, people can have access to greater resources without having to build more sprawl, without having to eat up green space. And that's going to be good for all of us. I think sometimes a lot of discussions around housing can be a little bit them or us, but I think for all of us, we can enjoy better housing for everyone. I do challenge this commission to think even more ambitiously. I think, there are a few, I think the direction of creating form-based code and the direction of creating mixed use zones is great. But I think we can do better even. There are things like minimum lot sizes. Some were dropped, thankfully, but only to about 5,000. 5,000 is an arbitrary number. I mean, we're seeing across the country where we're seeing places start to get rid of the minimum lot size because they can base things on the fire code. They can base things on normal building safety measures and not arbitrary codes like minimum lot sizes or minimum dwelling sizes for that fact. We should also be looking at the parking minimum as well, and not just one and a half per unit, but maybe even less. For instance, the architectural design of Main Street is impossible if you have too high of a parking requirement. We should at least examine the parking minimum requirement and think about even getting rid of it. It's not exactly necessary. Places can still provide parking. We just don't have to have the local government require it and create projects to be unfeasible. For example, the sheer number of PUDs is a great sign of how a zoning document was unworkable. And so many places had to lobby for a PUD. So we want to make a workable place that allows for more housing. So in short, it's not necessary to have these requirements. These requirements really just stymie the growth that we need to have. We do not need more growth in the wrong places, as you guys have focused on, and I think that's great, something we should celebrate. And that while this is a massive document, there's plenty more that I would love to share with you all. You all could find me on Abundant Housing Michigan. That's our organization. But I would like to leave you with this call to action. We need more housing. We've needed more housing. And now I ask you to push for even a more ambitious answer to the housing crisis. Housing abundance is possible if we want it, and it is literally in your hands, this commission, to legalize it as part of this region. Thank you for your time.
Evening. My name is Ted O'Neill, 6749 Old 28th Street, 6747 Old 28th Street. I own the transmission shop and the karate school that adjacent to 150 contiguous feet at Old 28th. I'm Ted O'Neill. I own O'Neill's Transmission Service on Old 28th Street and the karate school across the street from JT's. I'm concerned, as many of you know, that Verberg Automotive has gone out of business and the township is acquiring that property. Tuffy has gone out of business and the township has acquired that property. So we now have two automotive repair shops in our vicinity right here occupying prime real estate that you want to develop into these multi-use properties. It doesn't seem to include my business. What are businesses like mine on Old 28th Street to do? I want to continue operating for many more years, but it seems that your plans don't include me. So am I going to be getting incentivized to push out, relocate my business? I'm concerned about those types of things. I'm also concerned that there seems to be a lot of unrestricted amount of rental property that might be coming up and constructed in the area. And is our area really going to be able to support that? And a lot of thought obviously has gone into what you have all done here to this point, but I'm concerned that there's not going to be enough infrastructure to handle the amount of traffic really that's around here. It's going to be a lot. All of these places to live is fine. But these multifamily houses, they're going to have at least one, probably two cars each. Are they going to have garages to keep the cars out of sight? Or are they going to have carports outside? As much as the aesthetics are being concerned with these zoning changes, how much of the automobile is being concerned in that, and some of the detracting components of that? So those are just my concerns. Some of them personal, mind you, that I see it affecting my ability to go on with my business, and it's concerning to me in that regard. So it's just a comment, and I'm concerned about the apparently unrestricted amount of rentals that would be going on. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hi. I'm Joe Cucinola and I own the JT's building. And 6716 Old Clinton Street. I'm voicing the same concerns that Ted has with. We've been through this, been in for 50 years. Opened in 1975. And stayed the course. Started at 800 square foot with 2 pizza ovens and a dream. Okay, so purchased the property, had some property next to O'Neill's that we bought. The last renovation we went through was we fought like heck to keep the road open. Okay, I don't know if that's such a big concern today, but with the residential that we're talking about, where are we going to fit with this? And I'd love to put a new front on my building, but my new front of my building's 10 years old, 12 years old. And we're just shy of 4 acres on the land. And yet in your beginning stuff in your plans, there was some comments about that really Old 28th Street has outlived its usefulness. So great idea with what you're trying to do. But those of us that have been there, worried about that. We're worried about property value. Because when the first renovation, when they moved 28th Street, we call it Old 28th Street. Well, that's what we have now. We have an Old 28th Street. And we're the last one to get landscape, the last one to get our landscape taken care of. We're on the phone continuously. There's a light out on the road, and this is what our concern is. I mean, O'Neill's have been here a long time. We've been here a long time. Just guys take us into consideration, because we can operate. You know, I don't have any worries about that because we can put seats in, we can put butts in the seats. I mean, that's not an issue. But if we make it harder and harder for them to get there, you know, I'd love to put 2 housing units on top of my building. But I don't know, if that's feasible with a whole new front. We've got an acre and a half behind us also. Water's a problem. That was our last renovation. That was as much as the building was to take care of the water. Consider that, because everything ends down at the bottom of the street, ends up in Rishi's parking lot. And think about it. Thanks, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Evening. My name's Dirk Martin. I live on 36th Street. I just want to talk about sidewalks on 36th Street. They're starting to get bad and I haven't seen any progress on them. I see a lot of traffic on them, trucks and people cutting down trees and using the sidewalk as their parking spot. Also, the corner of Buttrick and Cascade or 36th Street, there used to be a sign for the kids to see where they're at. That was cut down and it's not put up. So I would like to see that back up for the kids. Other than that, you guys are doing a good job.
Thanks, sir.
My name is Ken Lovell. I live at 8205 Shady Brook.
What's your first name again?
Ken. Well, the question I have is, in some of the discussions, you guys use many times the word quality. I don't know what quality means to you or not. We might be in sync. I don't know if it's a part of the materials that are going to be used. Are we going to have that set up as these up? So there is a plan, and can we see that, or can I find that? Good, that helps with that. Then the second part of that question goes to our community. I believe in many cases is becoming unaffordable for a lot of people. My kids and different things, unless they have a sizable chunk of money, and sizable, and I might be wrong throwing the number out, 300 to 400,000 to start. Then you get a house and they're not moving in this area. Okay, so when we add this quality issue into it, I'm wondering what that's going to add to either square footage of a house or approximately a cost, what it's going to add into the new homes that are built in here, especially if we have certain things that are set up for it. So it's a concern that I just like to have some answers for so I can feel comfortable. Yes.
My name is Robert Camp. I own some property at the end of Quiggle Avenue and a couple different pieces. I'm a realtor, so I'm looking from a different perspective. The only thing I want to address, I guess, is I know it's a tough job and you want to control stuff and you can do that. I understand that. But if you get it so burdensome, I don't know if you realize how much things cost today to build. And when you put so many controls on, particularly with public roads, it's massive. If I look at Cascade and say what the new rule requirements are with grades, et cetera, the width, the expense, it's already bad enough with a private road. You can control private roads. You just have to have things specified and set up. But when you start limiting property owners to no more than 4 lots, your development is done. I mean, your development days are over here, period. I mean, it's going to get so expensive to build, which it is already astronomical, to add that burden and those limitations. You can control private roads. You don't have to go to Kent County and say, we want a public road and all those restrictions. Roads are expensive, period. Just put some controls on that in a different manner and allow it, because otherwise I don't think you're going to see any more developing here.
Hi, I'm Nancy Erdley and I'm at 1441 Sandy Point. And in response to an email I got from our trustees about feedback, I had put together some thoughts before tonight's meeting and sent them to them. And I came to here and to see if, I'd never heard of form-based code, but that's not surprising, I suppose. But so my thoughts were before I was here, but nothing I've really heard has really changed too many of my thoughts that I wrote down. So what I said to them was, first and foremost, I believe we need to make the township an attractive place for people to live, but also an attractive and easy place for companies to do business. And we've heard that certainly tonight. So with that in mind, I gave my comments. So relative to the form-based code in the village area, I said, although I wasn't staunchly opposed to this approach, my initial response is to oppose it. My overall concern is that it leaves zoning decisions open to very non-objective and undefined criteria, and thus very difficult for businesses in their planning processes. Defined zoning doesn't leave the area open to the whims of politicians and so forth at any given time, but provides the guidelines that a business needs to open and grow. I think that flexibility can be built into the zoning requirements that still allow for the adaptability of buildings over time. Second, I've long said, and Grace, this is no surprise to you, in my mind, the idea of a village in Cascade, particularly one that's walkable and pedestrian friendly, is, I think, kind of laughable. The area in question, we call it a village. It's not a village. It really is not walkable. I don't think it will ever be. I feel like it's kind of the Ada wannabe mentality, even though that was kind of dissed tonight, but that's kind of permeated the township. But instead, I think we need to make it a very business-friendly area that attracts new businesses, keeps them, and allows for easy parking and access for their customers. I look at the park on the corner of Thornapple River Drive and Cascade Road, and I drive by it many times in the course of a week for years. I still have yet to see one person using that park. I mean, people don't carry their ice cream across the road from Frosty Boy or Jam and Bean and eat their cones there. They don't bring their children there or their pets, and they don't sit on the benches and enjoy the traffic passing by. I said this years ago and have yet to even see one person using it. So again, to me, the goal of the township and the village should be to get great businesses in there, good looking businesses, making it easy to meet the requirements, while maintaining, the look, but thereby growing township revenues and giving Cascade residents an alternative shopping area to Ada and the mall's clothing store. So if walkable is defined as walking from a restaurant to a clothing store, then I'm good with the term walkable in that theme. The land use changes, the Star Business and the Centennial Park, those I oppose, since I think they do two things, both negative, and I heard somebody mention this, I think. One, shrinking the business tax base, and two, increasing the burdens on the schools that service those areas, while, to repeat, reducing the tax base that supports them. And the likelihood is that the greater residential density means apartments and not property paying taxpayer homeowners. I prefer that Cascade Township keep its reputation as a community with a great majority of individual homeowners, which I have heard that here tonight, which is good, versus a Kentwood known for its massive number of apartments, as we all know. So, and just finally, on the allowing of mixed use for Old 28th Street, given that's a very limited area, I have no issue with that change at all, unless there's, more to it that I haven't heard. So those are my thoughts before. And like I said, I don't know that it's changed from what I've heard here or from the people that have spoken thus far. So anyway, thank you very much.
Jordan Painter. I own a real estate brokerage on Old 28th Street, 2795 Orange Avenue, and then live in Cascade also. So thanks for all your work. It's awesome to see investment in the community. I think it's great. I do want to reiterate what the other real estate broker was saying. I have a client right now relocating here, and they were looking to build in Cascade, and they're building in Terra Nova, and they bought the cheapest lot in Terra Nova, and their build cost, they're struggling to keep under 1.5 million. And so affordable housing in Cascade is a joke anyway, but to limit private roads is going to make it nearly impossible. It would be double the cost just to buy the lot to build on. So like the other guy was saying, I think it will be very difficult for any new development. And if you think about this area, east of Buttrick is about the only place there's still buildable land or substantial buildable land. So if you would consider potentially offering guidelines to private roads of maybe withholdings or funding for future development somehow, as opposed to banning it, I think it would go a long way to continuing to have somewhat reasonable build costs in Cascade. So, thank you.
Reiterate one other thing with the public. The grades are the hugest thing. If you look at Cascade right now,
Then I have to come up to the podium and we can only have one, you can only speak once.
Thank
There we go.
Anybody else? Sorry.
I'm Michelle Lauer and I live at 2992 Overlook Summit. And my family first moved to Cascade over 50 years ago. I lived on both sides of the river before now we have a place up at the summit. So I've been here a long time customer of JT's, and I have a little bit different experience. The village, I do see it as a village. I've stopped down to the park randomly. I know that you can't always see it from the roadway, but if you go into the park and park, I've seen people fishing. You can get right down to the water's edge. My daughter grew up at that park, going there and playing on the splash pad. So I think that area is a treasure to our community. And that's the first concern that I wanted to raise, is that in the strategic plan and the master plan, the area around Cascade Road and Thornapple River Drive was designated to be target future park area or green space. And now I see that it's being changed to form-based code. Hopefully that doesn't negate those plans in the strategic plan and the master plan, because that whole area would benefit the community by being additional green space or park space. The second concern that I had is that the proposals, while really interesting, I didn't see a lot of objective data, and that could go a long way toward responding to some of the concerns regarding traffic and environmental concerns with the additional density. The third concern is that the proposals could benefit developers and outsiders at the expense of current residents. So we just ask that that be balanced, that the current taxpayers and residents of Cascade be prioritized over people that would want to come in and profit. And I've heard other people say similar concerns. And then the fourth thing is that I did hear that to residents, this wouldn't be a big change if you're a homeowner. But on slide 56, that shows the form-based code, I'd like to challenge that a little bit, because if you're a resident who lives anywhere around the areas that are being changed to form-based code, you'll bear more of the burden. There are some costs and some changes that will affect those people. The first one is that the development could be much closer to the lot lines than under the existing code. In some cases, it could be under the old code as small as 0 feet. And in fact, in the new form-based code, it shows that along Thornapple River Drive, some of the side lot lines would be, there is no setback required, but you can build right up to the lot line. I had a concern about buildings of potentially unlimited height, because you did have the 35-foot max, but then people could petition for higher, but I understand that's been resolved. So thank you for listening to feedback on that. Similarly with blocked views, if there was the potential for unlimited height, it could block some of the views for the neighboring residents. So thank you for addressing that. It appears that you've also addressed the density, which is good, because there were concerns with increased noise and congestion. So thank you for that. But I'd like to point out that there could be decreased wildlife with the setbacks that are recommended for the form-based code areas. If you're going to have 0 setbacks from the side lot lines, that's going to preclude wildlife from going between the buildings. So right now in that area, we have a lot of deer, we have a lot of turkeys, a lot of natural beauty, and a lot of wildlife. So I think that not allowing them a path is going to really be disruptive to them. So even though change is inevitable, careful consideration can prevent unintended consequences. So I would just ask that you consider that feedback. Thank you.
Hello, my name's David Prindiville and I live at 4994 Sequoia. I just want to say that the 3 designs that I saw spoken on the slides, I was unimpressed, particularly with the Victorian style. I don't think that's good at all. That's just what I wanted to say.
My name's Jim Schumar. I own a commercial property on Old 28th Street, between JT's and Cascade Road, essentially. So, I guess a couple of things. First off, thank you so much for keeping, no one is sleeping in a tent in front of our buildings. No one is just pandering money. I can't tell you how important that is. As I go through our community, it's not true everywhere. And that is critical to continue that level of tolerance, I guess. So I'm fortunate. I get to go to the hardware store. I go to JT's for pizza. I go to O'Neill's for a transmission. Cascade Automotive takes care of my car. It's the whole community is really important. In one area, the concept of quality is a little concerning. So when I own a building and have to maintain it, every day I think of quality, right? Seal coating, asphalt, roofing, windows, everything. And I have to make sure that for JR's incredible hair salon, that I'm competitive with the rent, but my quality is good, right? So when he goes to renew his lease, he's like, I like this place, I want to stay, and he does it. When Deb McDonald does her interior design business in my building, her clients are good, they're happy, they like it, she does well, she stays. So quality is, it's something I pursue all the time on the buildings I own. The bank, right? They want me to pursue quality to carry that loan, right? My tenant wants me to pursue it. I got a call today, ironically, from two ladies in Ada, and they want to find space because they cannot afford Ada. The quality is so good there, they can't afford it. They can't. I've looked at those buildings, they're beautiful, the facades. JT's, I'd love to do a facade too. I did a facade maybe 15 years ago on the old 20 on my property. I'd love to reevaluate that, right? We like to stay current, but building costs are huge. So, ironically, it's, how far do we go with quality is probably the key question. I pursue it myself. My tenants, if it's not good, they'll let me know, right? If there's potholes, they let me know. So no offense, I don't need a third party to do quality, right? Between the tenant, right, the owner of the building, the customer, we make sure the quality's good. And I'm with the gentleman, that second picture, the building that's right on, I looked at that building. We couldn't rent it. We couldn't buy it. There's no parking in front. There was no tenants that wanted it. I think there's someone in there now, but there's not much activity. So be careful with, you put a building right up against the road, no parking in front. It's tough, right? JR, hair salon.
Yep.
His tenant, they want to come in. They want a handicap spot right there in front of his salon. That's what they want. They don't want a path to walk through a garden, with all due respect. They don't. They want to drive up. They want me to make sure it's snow plowed, but they want easy access. All right. So that's what we do every day between tenants and building owners. We wrestle with that. We make sure it's good. We pay our taxes, right? We make sure those are on time and they're paid in full to keep the whole cycle going. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Trish Hilkema. I live at 3130 Howledge. I do want to thank you guys. I didn't know much about this before I came to the meeting tonight, so I learned a lot and I really appreciate that. We've referenced a lot about Ada. I do want to say that is one huge concern I had coming to this meeting. Ada is beautiful, like everybody said. I love the look of the buildings, but they needed to only have about 1/3 of them. It's very congested now. They didn't do anything with the roads. And so it's very hard to navigate. It's very expensive to shop in Ada. So we basically try to go there as little as possible now. And I don't want Cascade to turn into that. So I'm glad that you're thinking along those lines. The one thing I do wonder I didn't hear it addressed tonight, but one thing I noticed in Ada is they started ripping down some of the lovely historic homes because they just wanted to build a mini McMansion. Will we have anything to address that? Because I would hate to see some of the residential neighborhoods that, you know, they say, oh, this house is, you know, an outdated style and we just want to build this big 3-story thing. And now, you know, people can't see around it, that kind of thing. And then if we do expand with the growth pattern, what would we do to address the road situation? Because I live right by the bridge that just got done, that goes over the Thornapple. And it was crazy. I mean, trying to get through there, it was so congested just because, you know, they were shutting the lane down. And I was thinking as I was driving over it, man, if there was any more people living around here, it would be like this all the time. So that would be my comment, is possibly addressing ripping down some of the I'm not historic, but a lot of, like, my house was built in the 60s. So I mean, it's starting to get vintage now, you know? Thank you.
Anybody else?
Nobody, that's right there.
Deb McDonald. I actually don't reside in Cascade Township, but I am in Jim's building. And he takes very good care of me. Ironically, I'm here today because my business is in Cascade, but this morning I attended the Ada Township meeting. And one of the reasons why myself and many others in my community attended that meeting was because parking and traffic has presented a lot of problems for us, as well as the upkeep of the downtown area. Whether the streets are not being cleaned, the landscape is not being managed on a regular basis, but it's mostly because of the influx of traffic. At times, just leaving our developments, we have to wait at least 25 or so cars to even make a turn, and that's a right turn. Making a left turn is absolutely impossible unless it's completely dark out and there's no traffic. So that's one of my concerns, because when I travel on Thornapple River Drive and then turn onto Cascade Road, I sometimes run into difficulty trying to get into the building because of the car wash is directly across the street. So we play this little tag game, and I always step aside to let the cars that are zooming in to the car wash because I don't want to have to, you know, crash into them. So I experienced that a couple of times because I'm not there, you know, 8 or 9 hours a day. I'm in and out of my office. So what I can say is that's bearable compared to what I put up with in the area in which I live, because it is a problem. And that's one of the issues that we talked about today. So I hope that that is not something that this ends up becoming. So thank you.
My name is J.R. Cottridge. I own the hair salon Jim referenced earlier. Grown up in the community, don't live here, but been here since 2000. My family owns a business in the community as well. And I am on the old 28th Street corridor, and it feels like a lot of these new plans seem to be leaving a lot of business owners in the dust a little bit. And where are we going to go if we get a lot of mixed use properties built in? You're making the facades very difficult for the existing businesses to meet your standards. And I'm sorry, when's the last time anyone became a Victorian style carpenter?
Anybody else want to come forward before we close public hearing?
I'll just say a couple quick things. Dan Lauer, Michelle's husband, same address. Just a couple things to re-accentuate density and the balance of density and infrastructure. And when we say infrastructure, we're not just talking about water and sewage and other things. Refuse, I think, with density becomes a big problem. It's not managed correctly. Sometimes commercial and residential has a challenging managing refuse. And the other thing is just vertical in nature, regardless of whether it's commercial, residential, outbuildings. As expensive as it is to build today, the trend is to build up vertically. So I'd ask you to really kind of think about fences when it comes to vertical height in all of the zoning districts. And thank you for your time.
Anybody else?
Yeah, fences, not those kind of fences. Maximum height, so, oh, shoot, sorry.
All right. Okay, thanks everybody for coming. At this point, I entertain a motion to close public hearing.
Motion to close out.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. So the public comment period is now closed. Thank everybody for coming, making your comments. And at this point, here staff, anyone else, no further public comment is allowed unless we reopen. So at this point, I think we're gonna move on to some staff response.
Yeah, so as the public comment was going, I was taking some notes and I did. But I did register 4 comments that were questions that I think we can answer. I also registered a number of advocacy or advocacy on a number of points. Which if the planning commission is interested, we could take them point by point and determine if there are revisions to be made, or you could sort of discuss things more generally based on advocacy or that's the. I do think we should answer the 4 questions.
Yes, I think so.
Okay, so the first one that I wrote down was, what are the building materials requirements? Anyone viewing the zoning ordinance online, they are, the building materials requirements can be found in section 8.4C. And those requirements apply to commercial, mixed use and multifamily development in the form-based code and in the overlays. They do not apply to single family homes, and they do not apply to anything outside of those districts. So even a commercial or industrial or multifamily outside of those districts would not be subject to the building materials requirements. That was actually 2 questions on my list. What are they and do they apply to houses? There was a question about whether the Tassel Park expansion is still proposed in the village. I'd refer that to supervisor and township manager perhaps. With the auto repair business that's been acquired.
The township is in the process of buying Berber's, not putting them out of business. It was really sad that business can come to an first circumstance. It's really sad that they are in that spot. I go to Berber's all the time. But those are not because of pushy car dealerships. Those are because those are 2 critical spots right at the corner of, I mean, if you're looking to preserve Cascade's character, or the riverfront, in that Thornapple River Drive, I think it's one of the most beautiful spots in the township. And having Berber, one, I think aesthetically it looks a lot better, which increases all of our property values, but also the goal is hopefully to be able to connect. Our number 1 complaint, can't cross Cascade Road safely, pedestrian. So the goal is to try to go underneath Cascade Road along the river for some kind of boardwalk, then you need the space at Berber's. And then as far as O'Neill's, you can sit there and do absolutely nothing because this only applies to people who want to redevelop, the property owners that want to redevelop, or undeveloped property. And we're not trying to push car dealerships car repair places out, but I guess it is fair to say that the zoning isn't necessarily encouraging more.
So thank you, Grace. I will also note that parks are allowed in all zoning districts. So no matter what zoning district something shows as, the township, if it buys the property, can still build a park. And then the last question I heard was, will there be anything to prevent single family teardowns? There is nothing in this ordinance that explicitly prohibits the demolition of a single family home and the building of a new one, but I will say that because the rules governing the construction of single family homes are not changing, any new homes replacing old homes would be similar in scale and location on their lot, likely to the old one, because they'd be built under the same rules. And so what you see in some places where a house gets torn down and a new house that takes up the entire lot and is an extra story tall comes in, that would not be allowed. All of the setbacks that govern the neighborhood now would apply to the new construction as well.
Hey, Chris.
Yes.
Is it fair to say too, and Trish, I agree with you, but from like private property rights, we can't tell people. It's always a balance, right? We can't we can't pass a law that says you're not allowed to, I mean,
So
we have to let people have some control over their private property. I don't think it
Yeah, it is a balance.
could we pass a law that I'm not saying we would, and it's not in the zoning ordinance, but like anything built, you can't tear down your house if it was, you know, built before 1970 or something like, I don't think there's anything we can do with that.
No, probably
But
not.
I agree with you, ADOT's house looked great, and it's stunk that they went, but it's not a government fix.
there are communities.
Through
yeah.
historic district,
Yeah.
it's not a zoning tool, and it's something that would need to be created and voted.
We're not.
It's not in.
There are some communities that have created demolition restriction zones, but they're not bans. They're just an extra step in the process where you have to come to the planning commission and get approval. There's a public hearing and it can be denied, but it's not an outright ban. So, but none of that is in this order.
Let me speak a little bit to redevelopment of facades. I think Jim Schumer actually mentioned, seal coating, asphalt, windows, some of those elements, if you're not changing your footprint, you're not required to meet the current standards. So there's nothing that's going to limit someone from doing the necessary improvements on an existing building. And on top of that, we're creating these rules, but the DDA is also involved in creating ways to make this more feasible for current business owners, because our goal really is to keep the current business owners. So on top of doing the zoning ordinance that has requirements for the facade or for design, we're also implementing facade improvement grants where the DDA would chip in to improve your facade. So there's ways that we can continue to work together to encourage small businesses in Cascade to continue functioning. And that's our intent.
I say something about the government or about the housing crisis. Again, you want to preserve your property value or raise your property value once you get in, but then you want your kids to be able to move into, or your 20, make it affordable. I don't think that government will solve housing crises. I don't think they can. The market determines affordability. You're not going to zone it. It's ignorant, short-sighted, and I think it sabotages your community to make your zoning about affordability. Look at the Redwood apartments behind Culver's. I'm not ripping on those apartments, right? But that wouldn't be allowed here, now, that type, some of the materials, the setbacks, green, that kind of stuff. Those would be what a developer calls affordable. You get in there for $2,500 a month. The market sets that. So the developers call it affordable. I would argue it's cuts corners. When it's a newer building, you can charge great. And then what happens is it deteriorates over time and the community is left with that. So I just think that whole push for affordable, and Cascade's not a starter community. I didn't even think about moving to Cascade until I was in my 30s. And then I was super happy. I didn't have this right. Like I demand affordable housing in my 20s because I was poor. Like it's just, we're not a starter community. So you get this, I want my kid to live here, but I also don't raise my taxes and keep my property really high. Like if you can do a compound, that's great, but don't look to Cascade Township's government to fix the housing crisis. We're not going to. And also the concerns about pushing us out. If I were a pizza place on Old 28th Street, I'd be looking forward to it. Now, again, it's going to take time and there's no forced redevelopment. This is all voluntary. This is looking at future development, but nobody's being forced out. Nobody's being forced to change. It's more like looking at what we would allow in the future. But the governments do not solve housing crises, and we don't set the rates either, because you can build a really crappy, poorly built, ugly residential place in Cascade Township, and it's brand new in Forest Hill School District, you can charge $2,000 a month. So I don't want to, we're not going to agree with developers. There's always going to be a tension, and frankly, on the whole private road thing, I side with tax-paying residents if you got in versus cutting into a developer's profit. Because all the people who did squeeze in onto the rural 28th Street, who got into one of those McMansion subdivisions, are all begging us to stop it for the future so it preserves their green space and rural character. And by the way, we want a big pathway because we just moved here from East Grand Rapids. Like, you can't have it both ways. But people need to be realistic about what can happen and what the government's role is in making it happen. And I think there's a lot of frankly, just misunderstandings. People don't, I mean, we've been looking at this stuff for a year. I understand it, but I think overall, I think it's the right move for Cascade, the right direction. But it also sounds like East Germany style stuff when you haven't been living with it for a long time.
Chris, do you have any other points you wanted to address? And, I guess the one thing that I heard a little bit is, just saying some comments about concerns about renters, someone saying like unrestricted, rental development.
So on that note, we are not allowed to tell a developer that they are not allowed, or actually, we're not allowed to tell a property owner that they are not allowed to rent their properties. I'm just gonna confirm that, Mr. Homer.
Short-term rentals are a little different.
That's true, but that's different than saying you shall not take this piece of real estate and lease it to someone, right? And that is not a function of zoning that we are allowed to use. However, we do have a carrot rather than a stick to incentivize homeownership. And that's that a residential development can have more dwelling units if they're home ownership. And if not, then the cap is low. So we have an incentive to do home ownership, but we cannot say you may not rent this out. What we also have is a cap on the total number of units. And that cap, as was noted, there wasn't a cap in the form-based code in the previous draft. There is now. There are areas that allowed housing, now they don't. There are areas where their density cap was lowered by the board on August 7th. So there are now restrictions in place to keep the developments in those areas commensurate to the infrastructure in those areas. That's what the goal is. And if the density is going to increase, then there are going to be quality of life improvements that go along with that. That's the idea. So that is it.
Okay, so I mean, those concerns, they're coming from the mixed use character of the overlay district, is that?
So I heard that, and I do think that
Is
that's
that
something
right?
that
Is that?
well, not to
That's my
speak for anyone who
perception.
spoke, but my impression is that there's a concern that the potential to overburden some of these properties with activity. Right. And so if the planning commission shares that concern, some of your options may be to look at perhaps increased rear setbacks along Old 28th Street, for instance, like some of those woods in the back or the neighborhood, some quote. There was also advocacy for relaxing the relaxing the expectations on existing property owners when they expand their building. Because I think we should be honest that the code as written kicks in these requirements if your footprints get bigger. So yeah, repairs and that kind of thing, even facade upgrades would not kick in these requirements. But if you want your business to be bigger, that is going to kick the requirements in. So if the planning commission heard that advocacy and wants to respond to it, that's a place to address potentially what is required of these expansion rather than the new development.
Okay, and to me, I guess it sounds like some of the concerns about like the rental housing for example, because there were that's been addressed. Some of those concerns have been heard and revised.
Yes, just to explain what it said before. So there is actually a philosophy in form-based coding generally that a density limit isn't necessary because if you meet all the rules, there's only so much building you can build because the rules are setbacks and minimum lot size and maximum height. When you put all those things together, and parking, there's only so much space. However, the subcommittee in two different conversations came up with that and then came up with well, what if we want to allow a little bit extra height? So there's a penthouse unit that can see the river or something. And I'll just be honest, in those meetings, we didn't put the two and two together that the public put together and brought to the board members and said, hang on, you put these two together and you could get unlimited height. That was a very good point, and that's why the amendment.
Anybody else? Comment?
I just have one thing that did last night, but the hotel area that we currently have. I do think there's lots to talk about renters and different things that we do. As the board member, we have talked a lot about some of the problem areas with our hotels. What would the new district overlay in that particular area, specifically the area north of Costco and Target? West of 96,
Yes.
I think is the main.
Sure. So the new zoning ordinance is intended to open up the opportunities to invest in that area with new construction. It does open up the opportunities to renovate buildings. However, what it doesn't open the door to is taking the existing hotel buildings and simply calling them apartment buildings, because instead of renting the room for a night, you rent it for 6 months or a year. That is not allowed under this ordinance, and that is not the same as telling people they can't rent the building, because what we're saying is that hotel room is not a dwelling unit. It does not meet our definition of a dwelling unit, therefore someone cannot live in it, they can only stay in it overnight. And so that is one tool that the township has to combat some of the blight that has gone on in that area. I do think that more long-term, this opens up the opportunity for some of those aging buildings to be removed and replaced with new buildings that would likely be a commercial and residential building instead of a hotel.
There's a big demand, there's a big demand to make those hotels, turn them into apartments. You know, that would be just a death sentence for Cascade, because they were already using them as long-term stays, and that was that's not airport commuters, that's like a whole subsection of something you don't want to live by. And if you make it legal, basically, like, it's cheap and you get to stay as long as you want.
That's some of the weird wonky.
Yeah. It's like the dumbest thing you could do ever if you care about your community. But developers are already on the phone asking, like, everybody's asked about that.
That's the weird wonky stuff that goes into the day-to-day of our zoning administrator and in the planning department, is those comments where I'm like, and people want to get creative on definitions and requirements. And we wanted to make sure that we had enforceable rules that were clear, that we could go to and say, this is the definition. And that was the intent of a lot of the changes that we made in this ordinance that we'll probably never, no one's gonna really read through, but for us to, yes, so, for Michelle. For us to be able to, you know, make sure that we're doing our job for the citizens of Cascade on a day-to-day level. There's a lot of things in this ordinance that are needed to follow up on what you guys desire. I do want to say we have three kind of housekeeping items that are on the motion in front of the planning commission that I'd like to at least address quickly. Which are three changes that we're recommending the planning commission would make today. So we have put forward a zoning ordinance that we're, you know, happy with, and that would have been that the subcommittee has spent a lot of time ironing out. But as we continue to administer it, we will continue to find things that we can fix. The three that are before you are side setbacks. There is a neighbor that called about side setbacks and hey, it looks like you're increasing the side setbacks, which used to be 25 feet on each side, or total on both sides, with a minimum of 10 feet on one side, and then you could wiggle around all the cases. We're recommending that all language related to residential district R1, R2, the RC, and the farmland preservation be moved back to what our current ordinance is, and the motion in front of you just clearly does that, so we have the ability to make those changes before the introduction of the zoning ordinance. We also had some dialogue from neighbors and feedback that's given to board members, and then we just thought that, hey, you know, you're allowing chickens, but we're not actually regulating that they can't be running around your yard and our neighbor's yard, so we strengthened the ordinance, putting in some language because we need to have those in enclosed areas and can't be true range in your yard. The last one is we had actually given the board the work session language about the location of fences on yards, so that you couldn't have a 6-foot fence on your side yard if it faced some of the busier roads. We drove around the township and just
Really, the fences are.
yeah, and we found that they're actually appropriate and the distance between the road and the property line is appropriate. That you could have a 6-foot fence in your side yard, so behind your building. So we've written kind of specific language in here that we would recommend if the planning commission is amenable or ready to make a recommendation to approve the zoning ordinance to the board, that you also add those 3 changes. And then there's also space too, if the planning commission would like to continue to deliberate, find any other changes that they would like.
And also just to be clear to everybody that's here, that once the planning commission, if the planning commission makes the recommendation forward, there still is a township board work session, which essentially we had one weeks ago, and it was a very lively session. And I think it was good, good deliberation on the board side, and we did not have anybody at that, well, a couple people at that meeting. And I think we'll have public comment in the beginning of that meeting as well. So I think that if anybody does have any further concerns or questions, or you go and read more of this, and you have other concerns or questions, to encourage everybody to come to the board meeting, the board work session on the 25th, and then the board first reading on
25th, 5 o'clock here. We'll bring more chairs and then no one will.
Yeah.
That's not the calendar.
Okay, it's not on the calendar. Oh, it's not yet, we'll get it. Oh, the presentation?
That be available on the website?
Yes.
Yeah, we can.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Yeah.
I'm still mixed up with the chickens and the goats.
I don't think we have.
That section is
No.
a lot.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you. Got anything we want to ask? All right, yeah, I just wanted to say too, I really appreciate staff, everybody else who's put in way more time onto this than me. We all live in Cascade, I own a business on Old 28th Street, can't make everybody happy, thanks, Jay.
We just have to make the right.
We need change, and I think it needs to be driven by a vision. I mean, for me, I think it is. It's not gonna make everybody happy, maybe, but it's scary. It's looking for. So, and just again, everybody, a lot more time than I put into it. I'm here like a lot of you, just taking this all in from all the hard work of other people. I appreciate it. Let's, anybody else up here has anything, I'd be happy to entertain a motion from someone.
You know, all.
You're the motion maker. We're looking at you, Wendy. You go.
Sure. Motion to recommend the approval of case 25-3892, amendment to the Cascade Charter Township zoning ordinance as presented in the draft zoning ordinance version dated 7/2025 with following changes. Remove the proposed side setback changes in the R1, R2, RC, formerly R and FP zone districts, and maintain the current side setback requirements. Add a new section 4.4.C.9, which states chicken in the R1 and R2 districts must be kept within a covered enclosure, including a coop and a run at all times. Chicken shall not be allowed to roam the lot or any other property. The entire enclosure must meet the setback requirements of section C.4.C.5 with the requirements of section 4.4.C.6 shall only apply to the coop itself. Remove the end of section 6.3.C.2, which reads, except when the except when the yard is adjacent to a designated major thoroughfare, and in such instance, the side street yard shall also be considered. Anybody have any?
Nope. Give support. All in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? 0, motion carries. All right, that concludes Article 7. Article 8 is another opportunity to acknowledge visitors or.
Am I to understand that this ordinance that you're describing was accepted here tonight?
It will move on to the board for them to deliberate.
We can still change.
There's 2 meetings.
Another work.
There's 2 meetings.
There's a work session for public comment, and then there's also the first reading of the zoning.
Oh, yeah.
For the Wednesday night board meeting, may I suggest that we move it out into the engine bay so we don't have to turn people away? That's been done in the past.
I think that we can figure out more seating in this room, because I mean, even if we were moved backwards.
Well, a lot of people left because they couldn't get in.
Yeah.
Well,
The capacity is 49 and I counted 80 in here.
Did people, were there some people who came up that couldn't even get in?
Yeah, there were a dozen people left.
Okay, let's. Sorry.
All right.
Excuses.
Thank you, and it's just, we're kind of dealing with what we have, renovations over the other space, so.
Is this public comment?
Yeah.
Awesome. Scott Van Salkman, 2570. I think the ordinance looks great. Sounds good. I like the limited scope of some things. I still have a question about the accessory dwelling units. What is a kitchen? I mean, if you guys want to talk back, that's great, but I saw something in there that there can only be like a permanent fixture for cooking. I mean, you know, so if there's a permanent microwave, is that then a kitchen and then you can't have a bathroom? I mean, or is it a stove? Is there, you know, what if you just want a refrigerator and a microwave, does that count? So just, and I looked in the ordinance and there wasn't anything. So that was my only thing.
I thought.
It was, my question was regarding the accessory dwelling unit. So say if you have like a large parcel and you want a pool house, sometimes you also want an extra bathroom and maybe place then to cook food there and not have it there. So is that allowed? It's not an accessory dwelling unit, but it is technically maybe the pool house. So that's only where I'm getting. And obviously we do have some larger estates in the township. So also regarding the private road, I live on a private road in a PUD, and thankfully, we actually have quite a bit of money saved for a new road, and I do think that is actually a selling point for when when houses do come up for sale, and they say, "Oh, well, this is our road, we have to maintain it," and you know, "Oh, we got $70,000 in there in the road fund," as opposed to, "I just moved in, oh, we need to replace the road, give us 10 grand for that." So if there are some rules along those lines, you know, because obviously we do need some more development, and I obviously you guys are trying to thread the needles here and everything, but if there's some ways to add stuff, and obviously you guys can't really get into the weeds of finances for private roads and things like that, but I don't know, just some thoughts, because obviously you have some people wanting it, some people don't, and so also one more thing I brought up at the prior township meeting about the Pathways and Parks Committee thing. There's a meeting tomorrow. There's no agenda online, nothing to show anything. And again, I don't know if there's some miscommunication with the staff up front, but there's still the Pathways Committee and Parkways Committee. But apparently that's morphed into one group, but it hasn't been relayed to actually show the agenda of what's actually happening in the meeting tomorrow at 8 a.m. So again, my comments to go. Thank you.
Nobody else?
Just have one question. Will the updated draft be available before the next meeting? It will.
Yeah, so a couple of things. One is anything regarding hotel zoning. The kitchen is defined in the hotel ordinance, so it is designed to answer that. So the hotel ordinance has that definition. Anything that was presented tonight, meaning the new version of the zoning packet, which was dated August 7th, and the presentation will be online. So wanted to make sure that we incorporate all changes that were presented tonight and that.
Okay. And we do have an answer on the kitchen issue.
It's in a hotel ordinance.
It's in the hotel ordinance. It's also in the zoning ordinance under the definition of dwelling unit, and it says a stove or cooking device and a permanently installed sink. So it's those two are your minimum, and simply putting a microwave in doesn't count.
Say cooking devices, air fryers and all kinds of stuff nowadays that might a more explicit definition.
That could continue to be refined by the township board, of course.
Yes.
But that definition goes a little further, I think. So where it says containing kitchen facilities, including a stove or cooking device and a permanently installed sink, bathroom facilities and sleeping facilities.
Yeah, I'm sure you would do.
Yeah, but it's kind of all encompassing.
It also says 2 or more rooms.
Right.
So there's a number of different things you have to hit to be long.
All right, if someone else has any other comments, Article 9, whether any other business. All right, Article 10, adjourn the meeting. Thanks everybody for coming.